Hey Boxers, this is Zack with Buildbox. This is part 5 in how to build your own video game, so let's go ahead and jump back into it. I'm going to go into my 3D world. I'm going to go ahead and delete this main character now. It's superfluous, it's unnecessary. I'm going to go ahead and press play again. Okay, cool. The trail is still working, so I've got that trail in there, but the trail's too big, so let's go ahead and make the width of the trail 30. I just don't want it poking out the sides. I don't want it being shown on the sides there. Okay, and you can still see it a little bit, but not as much. I mean, you got to have a real good eye to notice it, but it is sticking out a little bit more on the sides, so I don't want that. So let's go ahead and let's do 25. It's totally dependent on the size of your character there, whether or not this width is correct for your character or not, or whether or not it's poking out the sides and looking a little funky. I don't like the color of the explosion, right? The color RGB here, that is, when you crank it up to 255 all the way across, 255, 255, okay, and this is red, green, blue. This is the mixture red, green, blue, and once you crank it up this high, it turns out into a white object, okay? And the other thing is I don't really like the amount of the debris. I think 50 is kind of a lot. So let's go with like 20 or something. I think that's a little bit better. And then let's change the color on this to match the color of the character. So I'm going to select my main character. I'm going to open up my color here, and I'm going to go to the RGB sliders. Okay, and I'm going to check these numbers. Okay, 252, 85, and 105. Let's see if I can memorize that. 252, 85, 105. Let's try it. So we're going to go into the main character, and it was 252, 85, and 105, I think. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Command S real fast and go ahead and save again. Okay, so let's see what happens when you hit the enemy. Okay, cool. Now we're seeing some debris that actually matches the color of the character, and that's cool. That's what we want. All right, so perfect. Now I'm going to exit out of the preview, and let's make this game over thing happen. Because right now, if we're playing this, and you know, we've got not a whole lot going on here, but if the character's defeated, there's no way for us to play again. You know, we don't have a game over UI. We don't have any of that set up. So let's knock that out right now. So I'm going to exit out of my preview real fast. Okay, I'm going to go to my mind map, all right, and I'm going to right click any old space. You want to right click on some empty space, okay? So I right click just, you know, anywhere in the empty space, and I'm going to add in a new UI, okay? And I'm going to call this my 3D world UI. Perfect. And UI, just in case you don't know what that stands for, UI stands for user interface. Okay, so we're going to hook up the UI there. And then what I want to do is I'm going to double click on my 3D UI, and I want to add in, let's see here, I want to add in some logic. I want to add in event observer, and this is going to be my game over event observer. Okay, and it's already set up for us, so I'm going to go ahead and name it though game over. So that we know that once the game's over, we're gonna send it off somewhere else and do something else. And what this does is this creates a little output for the game over. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna right click some empty space again, and I'm going to create a game over UI. Okay, I'm gonna call this game over UI. And so now I'm gonna click out of here, and it's gonna update the name. And so now, once the game over event observer is triggered, let's send it to the game over UI, and let's make it so that we can put a restart button here, and then we can play the game again. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So first things first, I am going to add in some animations over here to the game over UI. I'm going to double click on this game over UI, and I'm going to use a couple animations that I kind of just use as standard animations when I do these templates, and I share them with you. I'll show you how I do it right now. And it's totally up to you whether or not you want to use this style of animation. It's not required or anything like that. I like to start off by bringing in a white image, and I make sure it's really small so that the white image doesn't take up a whole lot of room in my atlases, is what I meant to say. And let me show you what the atlases are. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command S on my keyboard. Let's go ahead and let's check out atlases. Okay, and what these are all the images that you're using in your game. Okay, and you fill up the space, and it takes these images from your atlases and uses them in your game. And so you can see in my first atlas, I've got this white image. Okay, I can go ahead, I'm going to exit out of my atlases now. I can take a little white image and I can just scale it out so that it fits my needs, and it covers the whole screen. Now, one thing I'm going to do right now, just because I think it's a good time, I like this game in portrait. I'm going to go back to my game mind map. I'm going to look at this. I do like the game in portrait, and this is what it looks like right now. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it more landscape. And so I'm going to go over here to my options menu, and I'm going to change the orientation from portrait to landscape. Okay, I'm going to hit OK on my menu here. And what that does is you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down a little bit. But you can see this is now what the camera view is going to look like. Okay, and I'm going to pull this back down here so you can see a little bit better. But now we're working within landscape view. And so what this is going to do is when we're looking at our game over UI, it's going to kind of reposition things into landscape mode for us as well. So I figured this is a good time to switch this over before I do it later. For instance, I've got this white image that I scaled out, and I scaled it out originally for portrait, and it was still in portrait mode. Okay, but I want it in landscape. So I'm glad we switched this up now. Let's go ahead and let's add in a restart button as well, because we have this white shading, but we also want to do a restart button. So I'm going to grab my restart button real fast, and I'm going to, or just a play button, I'm going to use it as my restart button, and I'm going to drop it in as a navigation button. Okay, and that's I'm going to use it with an action type of restart. Okay, so now what this is going to do is it's just going to restart the game for us. And I'm going to do my best to center it right here in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to keep it on top. I'm going to call this the restart button. Perfect. All right, and now let's do some animations to kind of, make this a little cooler, because right now it's going to just kind of flash on the screen and it's not as fun. So I'm going to first do the open animation, and I do want this animation to happen quickly, so I'm going to change the frames to just 20. Okay, and you can see now that it shortened the animation length. Okay, now we're working with just 20 frames, and that's what we want. What that means is it's going to happen quicker. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want both of these to just fade in. Okay, so I'm going to select both of them, and this is really nice. This makes developing really nice to be able to do multiple select. So I'm going to hit the record button, and right now the opacity on this is set to 1, and you can see that here it's listed, opacity is set to 1, and that's fine. I actually do want to set the opacity to 1, but I want it to set the opacity to 1 at the 20th frame. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on my keyboard, and what that does, and I selected opacity, and I selected 1. I clicked in here in this box, and you can see, you know that I clicked in this box because it's got this little green outliner right here, and then I hit enter, and what that does is it creates a little green marker. All right, down here, and I just selected that little green marker so you can see it a little bit better. So at the 20th frame, we now know that the opacity is going to be set to 1 for both of these objects. Now, let's go back to the first frame, or the zero frame, and let's change the opacity to 0. And I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to create another little green marker. And so this is a little animation placement marker, so I know that there's some sort of animation, some sort of adjustment is happening there. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and take off the record button, and now I'm going to press play, and you can use the little play button here to kind of preview what the animation is going to look like. Okay, and so you can see that once the game over UI is triggered and we're sent into this game over UI, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to the screen is going to get white. It's going to send us over into our game over UI, and then the restart button is going to appear so that we can go ahead and press it and restart our game, which is awesome. So that looks good. Now the next thing I want to do is I do want to give a little bit of an animation to this restart button, just because I think it is kind of a nice effect. So I'm going to just select my restart button. I'm not going to select my image as well because I don't want to do this animation for both of them. And I'm going to switch this up to 80 frames. So I'm going to hit enter. And so you can see now we've extended it all the way to 80 frames. The reason why I do this is because I found with 80 frames is kind of my sweet spot for making a scale animation like I'm about to show you. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit my record button. I'm going to select the scale here at the 0 frame. I'm going to hit enter. And it's already got a little green marker there for me, but it's gonna also create one in the for the scale as well. And let me go ahead and show you that, what I mean by that. I'm gonna open up the animation editor here, this timeline editor, and you can see by that little green marker right now there are animations happening, or animation placement markers that are happening for the scale in the X, Y, and the opacity change, because those are the only things that we've worked with so far. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this down a little bit, but that's what if you want to take a closer look and you can see like, okay, there's clearly an animation happening here and there's something going on, but what specifically is happening? And you can check that. You can check specifically what's happening here by opening it up. Okay, clicking on that little arrow and getting a better look at it. Now, let's go over to the 80th frame, and I'm going to select the scale again, and I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to create another placement marker. And so what I want to happen is I want the scale to be the same at the start of the animation and at the end of the animation. But in the middle, at the 40th frame, I want the scale to get a little bit bigger. Let's do 1.3 and 1.3. I'm going to hit enter, and then now we can see that there's a little green animation placement marker. And what this is going to do, and I'm going to show you this preview, it's going to get bigger, and then it's going to get smaller, and going to end up in the exact same size that it started at. Okay, now one thing that's going to happen though is this animation is only going to play once, because that's the way we have it set. So let's go ahead and let's set it so that the animation is going to happen over and over again. So I want that scale animation to get bigger and smaller over and over again until the player actually presses the button. So I'm going to loop this animation, and I'm going to go ahead and preview it so you can kind of see that it just keeps going and going and going. And it's nice. And you know what? 80 frames might be a little bit too much for you if you want to get bigger and smaller real fast. This might be a little bit slow for you. And so if you do want to switch up the frames and you want to change up the length of the animation, I definitely recommend getting rid of these animation markers first. Just select the animation markers and hit delete on your keyboard, and that'll get rid of them, because it's gonna be really confusing if I try to do 60 frames, right? And it's going to still have an animation marker set up at the 80th frame, and it's going to send things all out of whack. So if you're going to change the length of your animations, get rid of your animation markers first. All right, clean up a little bit before you start switching up the length. All right, Boxers, that's it for this video. Go ahead and keep an eye out for part 6 in how to build your own video game, and I will see you in the next video.